Okay, we'll move on to discussion items. Highway quarterly report. Is that you, Scott?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. You'll see a few of the initiatives that are in the packet today. Three of them specifically are 2050 Transportation Network Sustainability Plans for participating municipalities, and we'll be covering that later on in an agenda item, so we can certainly ask questions now or certainly wait till later on that agenda item to see where we're at on that. Intersection safety analysis plans. You did see the draft version of the counties. We was at the last meeting, and we're working on hopefully finalizing that one. Then again, extending that one to the local municipalities that are interested in a safety analysis plan of their intersections in their respective municipalities. And the third one that we're working on, which you'll see again later on in tonight's agenda, is our high-risk rural roads plans, looking at the crashes that are outside of the intersections. So certainly you can ask questions about that right now, but you'll get a good detailed listing of what that looks like a bit later on in the agenda. So they're all working through the draft and going to finalize some more dates in there. So certainly if anybody has any questions on any of those three, we'd be certainly happy to answer them now. But like I said, later on we'll be having a little more discussion on a couple of those items.
Sounds good. Anybody have any questions, or should we wait till he comes up again? Okay, move on. Excuse me. Wait, we're going to talk today. Transit ridership report.
If it's okay with the chair, we're going to have Charlie take this one, our transit manager. You'll see that we tweaked the ridership report a little bit this month to provide a little more information. In our world, it fitted on a front and a back sheet of a piece of paper, but in the presentation, it's two different sheets. Since we only have one service now to provide, we provide a little more information, a little more depth information. If we have to make changes through the next budget cycle, it's nice to start looking at the information a year and a half ahead of time.
Now, is this one of these charts that engineers like we saw yesterday?
This was Charlie's doing, so he's to get the credit and or the blame for this. And I did get a chance to review, and I think it's some really good data in there that we'll probably spend a little time to go over what it actually means and looks like now. And then over the course of the next year, when you have questions, we'll do the same kind of spreadsheet every month and graphs to kind of get a feel for what that looks like. But if you're okay, I'll let Charlie explain what he did for you.
Yeah, so,
hit the button, yeah.
Okay. So I broke it out into fare categories since I included December to include, let's see. So as you can see, the trips since the fare increase, which started January of this year, so I included December as well. So you can see the difference in the fare categories in ridership since December of last year. I also included the trip purposes for 2024. The two charts, they're for the year, they're not for the month. So that's why there's over 4,000 in employment there. And then the bottom chart, it's the trips by hour and day of week. So you can see our highest ridership periods as far as days and hour of the day. We're open from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. The 9 p.m. Is 9 to 10, so it's 5 to 6, 6 to 7, 7 to 8. So we are open till 10 on weekdays and Saturday. And then on the next sheet we have the ridership report that we would normally present. We've presented in the past with 2024 in there. And we also included the cross-county trips since the beginning of 23. The 2022 data, we switched softwares, and it's just hard to track that. Can't get exact numbers on the 2022 currently. Then we also have the drivers scheduled by hour and day of week, so you can kind of see where the drivers are placed throughout the week. See how that lines up with the ridership. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So in December, is that when we still had the old rates?
Yep, that's with the old rates.
Okay.
Is that it for you? Okay. Doug?
So that was part of my question. Well, that question I guess I knew the answer to, but that obviously made a difference in the ridership, as you can see, and we expect that's the trend. Any raised the rates, really suffered in the adult category. My question, follow-up question would be the hospital column. What is that for rate or what tickets or what is?
So we had an agreement, at least in 2023, we had an agreement that's been going on for years with Freighter and Hartford Medical Foundation, where they subsidize the trips to and from. So Hartford does Aurora hospitals, and then Freighter, they did the Freighter Hospital in West Bend. But starting this year, Freighter will only do trips from the hospital. It's only approved trips from the hospital. So that's where the hospital trips have gone down since Freighter changed how they subsidize the fares.
It's no longer to the hospital, it's just from.
Yeah, it's no longer to, it's just from.
So what is the fee for those? Is that different than an adult? Is that a separate whole?
Yes, so they pay, the passenger pays $2, and then the foundation or freighter would pay the remaining $3.50. So it's $5.50 for the whole fare, and the foundation or freighter would pay the other $3.50.
Okay, and I don't remember what the $5.50 fare rate, what does that align with? My memory doesn't serve me. Is that the elderly rate or
That was it was a dollar increase from the rate prior. So the rate prior was $4.50 for that. And this has gone on, this program's been, at least for the last 10 years, I couldn't see when it started, but it's been that's been the rate for at least the past 3 years, as far as I could tell.
If I could, so the fares right now, again, it's based on mileage based, if you recall. So the elderly disabled for 0 to 5 miles is $3. For adult is $10. For hospital is $5.50. Student is $4. So to get a flavor, so again, elderly and disabled are $3 for 0 to 5 miles. Adult is $10. Hospital is $5.50. So kind of split the difference, if you will, a little bit higher than the elderly disabled, substantially lower than the adult fare. Did that hopefully answered your question?
Yeah, that helps.
I don't think you want to go through the 5 to 10 category and 10 to 20 and stuff like that. So
Chairman Schleifer. Oh, I'm sorry.
Agency mean?
So agency is when a state agency pays for the fares. Often these people are disabled, so it's a rate. It comes out of their approved budget from the state, like they're normally like a social service kind of budget is set for them, and then tickets are given to them at this agency rate, which is a standard $15 per ticket. So it's not mileage based; it's just per ticket. So it doesn't come out of their pocket; it comes out of their budget from their state program that they're in.
I believe all these were on our paperwork when we were looking at raising rates, right?
yeah, so a lot of the data that you see here was on that data, and we thought it would be good, since you've seen that data before, us to look at the data kind of on a monthly basis, especially since we had a increased fare between December and January. We just figured you'd be kind of curious to see what that did to ridership versus just seeing the total number, which you see really doesn't show a picture of what really happened. But we did look at the adults. We did work with our vendor who does the service just to talk about when those people change from adult to the elderly category, disabled categories, was it legitimate? And they said yes. You can imagine that when you had a fare, if people didn't want to say they were disabled or say they were elderly, they could just pay the adult fare and it didn't matter. And so we had a lot that were just, in the system behind the scenes, it didn't matter. Now it does. And so we made sure that people that were even in those categories, we made sure with our vendor too that they were told about which category they should be in. So even if they were 70 years old and they said they were an adult, we would still make sure they realized they could have a savings by moving into elderly. We didn't just say, oh, look, they're an adult, ha ha. No, it was made sure that they were aware that they should get the elderly category now. Some have been riding for a long time too and just kind of naturally slid into the elderly category. So,
So in essence, what you're saying is that, yeah, our ridership is down just a hair, but who used to ride as adults before, maybe because of the fare increase, now they're disabled or elderly, which is why those two categories went up,
yeah.
you know.
They're more categorized correctly, and that helps us in our data as well.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and I noticed students had a big bump. I don't know if that's normal for this time of year or,
Yeah, I think we'd mentioned it could be possibly one student, if they rode, 10 times in that month, but I haven't looked into.
Right, remember it's a ride, so if the student takes a ride 5 days in the week, that's now 10 rides a week. So one person is 10 rides if they take a whole week. So you look at that going, yeah, went from 10 to 57. That might mean now probably took it maybe for the whole month or something. So
gotcha.
Yeah, just to follow that up to it, we always have to keep in mind it's not 75,000 people that rode last year. That's the rides. But
rides, correct.
I have I
Yes.
don't know if it's a ask. Now that we changed the fares this year, and by next month we'll have 3 months worth of data. Would it be possible to put together last year's cost per ride versus the 3 months this year, just to see what the difference in,
Okay, yeah, I can add that to the next
the cost
report.
per ride at this year's new rates versus last year's rates at the ridership, just kind of seeing how that affected, how the
Fares.
fare rate increase affected the cost per ride.
Okay,
It'd be kind of interesting.
So you don't want to know just what the total cost to ride. You want to know what cost they're paying for versus what the taxpayers are
Well, for instance,
subsidizing.
we, in 2024, we raised the fare rates, but ridership went way down.
Mm-hmm.
So just seeing where those numbers are, having a lower rate and more riders versus less
Oh,
riders and a
gotcha.
higher rate, how that,
So it might have been better off leaving them down to get more
well, I don't
ridership
think
or
that's the
something.
case, but it's not going to be
Yeah.
as significant as someone might
I
think.
understand what you're
Because
looking for.
ridership dropped, that's a lot. I mean,
okay,
and
yeah,
those numbers are all fares too, so that's not necessarily, I guess they all went up, but.
So then, wouldn't we want to see revenue and then cost per ride as a total?
That's what I was
Yeah,
asking for.
You mean
yeah.
revenue, or do you want to see both?
When you break it down, it'll
Yeah.
tell you what the actual cost
Yeah.
per ride is.
okay. So an additional chart with the revenue per.
So
okay.
it might say, I'm just going to throw numbers out there. Our cost for the county is $55 a ride, and they're paying $10 or $5. It'll show the
Okay.
difference between what they're paying and what's subsidized and what actually is. Does that make sense?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah.
Please and thank you.
See, we tend to like charts too.
Okay.
I see that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, only because it's a change.
It is,
Yeah.
and
So we
that's
want
good
to
data.
see, yeah.
Yep, you bet.
And that's why we figured it would be nice to show some of that data to you.
Okay. Any other questions on this?
Oh, I'm done, thank you.
Thanks, Doug. Okay, moving on. Roadway shared revenue update.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you may recall, the county has elected to do a shared revenue program in the county to the tune of $452,000 for the first year in 2024 and $461,000 in 2025. That worked through the strategic priority system here at the county. And how that program was run and set up was we worked with the chief local elected officials here in Washington County with all the communities involved at some level and knowledgeable. We had a meeting back in December. Washington County elected officials, Chairman Schleif and County Executive Shulman, were not present, did not participate in that voting group. That group decided to elect their own chair and then set up some ground rules and try to decide on how to best divide those funds up. We went through several iterations. I was there to provide technical guidance, but certainly was not a voting member in that group. And how they landed on to how to divide up that $452,000 was 70% would be distributed on the road mileage that they had, and 30% would be an equal share of the dollar amounts broken up amongst all the communities. And the reasoning for that is some of the smaller communities don't have a lot of road mileage and kind of came about if you did it solely based on roads, they maybe get a couple $1,000s only in potential monetary gain in that. And how the system is worked up was we've created a spreadsheet, provided to municipalities, and the highway department will furnish the labor and equipment at no expense. That comes out of the project funding for that, and then of the $452,000, and the local municipalities will be responsible for any material costs. And we try to break it down as best we could in a lot of categories of cost per mile on averages based on several years of experience. And if you know anything about roadways, if you're doing a crack fill on a road or a mask on a road, some roads there's a lot of cracks, some roads not so many. So you're trying to do an average as best we can to make that happen. And so we provided that spreadsheet, and the municipality said to get that spreadsheet back to us to look at those project lists to see what we actually could work, and we were able to accommodate most of those projects to date. There was a chip seal project in the town of Addison where we're working up in the northeast part of the county in the town of Farmington, Newburgh, north part of Trenton. So you can imagine that the crews going from there all the way over to Addison is an expensive proposition. And they've got their meeting tonight, so we're hoping that they look at other projects on our list that they can utilize and do to utilize the funds for the town of Addison. So next year we'll be over near the town of Hartford, so it makes much more sense. Otherwise, the town of Addison is paying for that whole crew, the chip spreaders, all the trucks, flaggers, rollers to load up and drive all the way over to town of Addison. Mobilization is a reality and expensive. On the attachment that I had to that is the work schedule, and I apologize for its side. And the good thing is you have a PDF that you can zoom in and zoom out to look at the work that is being done. One point of clarity is that you'll see that not all communities and municipalities are on that list, which means that the group decided that those that were getting shared revenue in another form would not be eligible for this funding. And it was again voted on by the group, not decided by the county. And so looking at that master spreadsheet, you'll see a bunch of the road work on the left-hand side, the different work we've done, and certainly some other towns at the bottom of the list. Barton and Trenton added some other stuff on there that was not on the original list, and we're certainly appreciative of their efforts to take the time to look at that. The good news is that not everything takes a lot of material costs for a town. If they don't have a lot of funds for material costs, there are certain things we can do like ditching. There's not a lot of material cost in ditching. There's not a lot of material cost in roadside vegetation removal, either mowing the grass or doing tree removal. As you can imagine, there's very little, if no cost. You'll see some pennies on there for tree removal because sometimes if there's invasive species and weeds, we like to put a little helper to make sure the stuff gets killed on top of those trees and branches that are cut off, so to make sure they don't propagate back up. So you see a nice long list of red is the material list that the local municipalities will be responsible for, and then the green would be what the county would end up subsidizing, working on for them. You'll see the number is not 452,000 yet because several of the communities that are in blue haven't been able to get that list back to us yet and finalized it. Town of Germantown was still having their meetings. Town of Trenton was doing their road works. We put some thoughts in there originally, and same thing with the town of West Bend. So there's some gaps in there yet that we have to do, and certainly we're more than willing to do other work for the towns, cities, and villages as well. So there's work that's above and beyond here that we certainly are capable and willing to do. Culverts, for instance, are coming up again this year, so we'll be doing that. You see a traffic study at the end at the town of Jackson. We just did a traffic study for them. The village of Jackson has requested a traffic study. So there's some other unique things out there that as we work on through the course of the year, if we're able to do it, we'll certainly be able to do that. So that kind of hopefully provides a kind of a quick overview of the program and how it's working. We have started it already. We have done work in the town of Polk, done mechanical work for the town of Barton. We started mastic work in the town of Erin. As you can imagine, the spring, except for tomorrow, has been pretty mild for us to be able to get out there and start some of this work already to get a little ahead of it. So we're appreciative to the towns and villages to let us start that work already so that we can accomplish all this task for them.
I noticed the units are a little different here for each item.
Oh, yeah.
You got miles in each and right linear feet.
Yep.
You notice one over the other, like is road chipping the most popular, or is it too early to tell what services you think would become?
Just looking at it, the culvert replacements are pretty high on the list as far as how many selected it. Pavement markings, pretty high on the list. Just looking how many crack filling. It's good to see like crack filling, right? That really helps the long-term maintenance of the roadway. Mastic as well. And some of the towns maybe don't have the money for pavement marking, but now they do. You look at the cost for the unit cost of the material versus the cost of the crews to be out there. Maybe now it's more cost beneficial. And we did a lot of painting ahead of time for the municipalities, and this being the first year, and we were very quick to get this done. And local officials, I'm sure, can attest that there was not a lot of time between December and February with the holidays. And I think this list is certainly subject to change over the next year once they have a little more time to actually digest it. We have a year under our belt. We'll be meeting with that group again in September of this year, and at that time we'll be looking through this list and see what else we have to accomplish. If there's any town that cannot utilize those funds, how to make sure they get spread out to other towns that can. And then they'll be able to pick their projects for next year at that time already. So a little more time to think about it and get it done before their budget season. Again, this is all done after I'm assuming most of the towns and cities and villages have their budgets completed already. So next year they know this is coming for 25. And so that list could certainly change just because now they might say, well, we'll put a little bit more on materials because then we don't have to worry about the labor or equipment costs coming through. So they'll have a little more time to think about it going forward. So I think that list will change potentially significantly over the first 2 or 3 years once we get into a program. The first year is always going to be a little more challenge for the local municipalities and certainly our county too. We looked at that and we did this back in January and February, and our mastic costs, we just came in March and they're 25% higher. Great. So I got to go back and talk to those towns and going, yeah, that $5,000 a mile is now $7,500 a mile, just because of material costs. So
It'll be interesting when we see, like you say, after a few years under our belt and see how we can tweak this and if we can take on more, or just to see where it'll go. Does anybody else have any questions?
I just have a comment. So I've been involved with this for a while. Supervisor Hartwig has as well. I actually chaired the committee that decided how the allocation got divided up, and I think there was a lot of good discussion in the room, and everybody felt, I think it was a unanimous vote.
Yes.
If I remember right, amongst the group of municipalities that were there to dividing up these services. And like Scott said, we're going to meet again in September every year, I believe, and then revisit, does it need to change the allocation formula? But I think it's definitely a good program and very much a help for these communities. I mean, that's a lot of labor and equipment costs that's saved. So I just think it's a good program to get underway.
Any other questions?
Just one with regard to the distribution. It looks like the City of West Bend, City of Hartford, Village of Kewaskum are not involved. Is this intended to be a 2-year setting, or as you said, the allotment was for 24 and for 25, but the distribution could be different in 25?
I would say it could definitely be different in 25. The local officials agreed that this was a 1-year decision, and that to be meeting in September again. It could be the same. They could decide on 80-20. They could decide on 50-50. There's a lot of other categories, too, that were not included, like equalized value and stuff was not taken into account. And, of course, those other municipalities that were receiving funds in other categories, as we do more shared services through the year, those categories are changing a little bit more now. Let's just pick on the town of Addison is doing IT services now, right? So now they might be above that line. I'm not saying they are. I just don't recall where the lines were. That data was all given to the committee, and I'm sure the committee members here probably don't remember exactly where everybody was at the lines. But as we increase the shared services in other locations, this one might go down for those municipalities. So it's definitely it's open to change. And again, I assume that since the first iteration of that committee did work so well, that again we'd let that committee make that decision and work that through. Again, I was there to represent the county as far as to provide direction, as far as information, more or less. I should say not direction, but information to that committee.
Yeah.
I just had a kind of a clarification to that too, maybe to help you understand that when Scott says the line above and below the line, so there's another formula for shared services, and the communities this group decided as a whole, the communities that are not in this program are ones that, based on that formula, are receiving their allotment based on that shared services. So Ewaskum is, getting other services, Germantown, Herbert. So they were above the line, and the ones that were below what the formula says they should get were included in this to try to get them closer to them. I don't have the chart with me, but it would make sense if you saw that too, visual. But that's why they're not in this.
But they could be next year.
But they could be taken out of it too if the committee decides that, because all of a sudden checks, I shouldn't even say it, but if they get rid of a service and decide to go with the county, that may move them above the line, and then the committee might decide, well, they're getting their fair share, so they're out of this pot or something. That's why we're going to meet every year to review.
Makes sense.
Well, and another example of that too is like the town of West Bend, when they were looking at their IT shared services, they didn't want to come forward with the money right up front to buy all that equipment, because they got to buy the equipment and our IT guys go and set it up. So they might table that for a year. Well, now they're probably below if they don't move forward with that, right? So now you got to tweak it. So yeah, this, like I said, it's a learning curve, and it's going to be interesting to see where it goes.
And
forward.
there's other shared services coming. We talked about the planner. If you have recalled planner, you'll see what the town of West Bend is looking at, a potential police officer sharing services, so or sheriff's deputy, excuse me. So there's other stuff that's coming this year too that might, before September, even change that line as far as who's above it and below it.
Right. Any other questions? Good. Okay, seeing none. Let's see, we're on the roadway safety plan review.
Yes, I'll be taking this one. And to give credit where credit is due on this, Josh Glass in our office has done the lion's share, the bulk of the work. I reviewed it, but Josh was able to do the lion's share of the work. To high level it, we have done an intersection safety plan several years ago, and now we're looking at those roadway segments between the intersections. And what I mean by that is roadways that are outside 250 feet of the intersection. We consider everything within 250 feet of the intersection basically an intersection-related crash, and outside of 250 feet is a roadway-related crash. We had to make the break somewhere, and so that made sense logically. And if it doesn't, we can certainly have that discussion later on, but that's the way we kind of make sure we're not double dipping on the crashes, that one's close by or not, and saying, okay, we go all the way to the center of the intersection. Because definitely that out in the more rural areas versus the intersections are definitely things you do differently to mitigate those crashes at those systems. So that's what we did. We looked at that same data between 28 and 22 to look at the same data that we looked at for intersections. We're looking at for the roadway safety analysis. And again, once we get this completed for Washington County, we certainly extend it out to the local municipalities as well to see if there's something we can do there to help them look at their crashes and to help mitigate those, because it's just a good policy and practice they have in Washington County. So We have a several-page document that's in there, and what we'd like to do is kind of keep it a little bit high level today. If you looked at the end already or got to the end to review it, you'll see a lot of the analysis is not yet completed. We'll be working with SewerPack. We'll be working with the DOT engineers to help us get that data and take all those crash reports, look at each individual crash report, and see what could be done to hopefully mitigate those circumstances. So you'll see at the end, it's definitely not complete. It's definitely a draft version at this point. But to give you kind of how we did the analysis and what we're looking at, and then kind of we certainly can dive into one or two at the end, but we're just not ready to really talk about each one. But we'd love to bring this back and with a more detailed on those and saying, this is the problem we're seeing, but this is our solution, and let's give that a try. And so, again, the purpose of analysis is obviously we want safe roads in Washington County. I think that's a common goal, not just of the county, but all local municipalities as well. And that's why we will be extending this program to those local municipalities who'd wish that going forward. So under one is the purpose, and you kind of see the crashes, kind of give you some data from Wisconsin to see what it looks like statewide. We are able to grab right from the database, from the community maps. If you're not familiar with community maps, you can certainly do a search for community maps. That has all the crashes in from 2017 on, and they're doing a job of trying to get the ones post or pre-2017, and we get the data behind the scenes, and it's a wonderful website. I highly recommend those that are interested in crashes to look at that. But with that data, we're able to do a lot of this analysis, and we work very closely with our GIS department, who was instrumental on helping up with that. You'll remember from the intersection, the functional classifications of road, arterial, collectors, and locals. Basically, you can think about in a common and highest level that arterial has a lot of traffic and locals don't have a lot of traffic, but they are split out. Map 1 shows all the county highway system. Again, we're looking at just the county highway system for now to see about crashes. And then that relates right to the jurisdictional authority of the county. So again, county highways, we have jurisdiction over those, and we control those. If it's a local road, it's a local municipality that controls what they can or cannot do in those roadways for certain improvements. And we show the functional classification map. Then we go through, and just like the intersection, we look at 3 different categories for the crashes. Total crashes in a segment is certainly important, but then we also want to look at the crashes that occur per vehicle traveling that road-based section, or crash rate. Again, trying to amortize and get all those crashes into a nice category. If you have a road with 500 vehicles and you have one crash, and you have a road with 1,000 vehicles a day with one crash, the one with only 500 vehicles a day is a higher crash rate. Right, one crash per 500 vehicles versus one crash for 1,000 vehicles, and of course, how we got to do this out, because it's for also larger roads. We do that crashes per million vehicles, so we take that 500, multiply it by whatever it takes to get to that to be a million, and multiply the top number by the same number. And then, of course, we got crash severity, and that's so important that we look at not only how many crashes happen there, but how severe are they. I know at the intersection analysis Josh went through with you, a crash down on Highway Q when it's 25 miles an hour, it's a fender bender, is one thing. A crash maybe up on Highway XX, that's 2 cars hitting each other at 55 miles an hour, is a much different situation. So we want to make sure we're looking at the crash severity as well. So again, using the GIS mapping, we were able to map out those segments on the roadway. That's map number 3. We're going to change those dot colors from red, because in all the other analysis, the red dots means a fatality. And so every time I look at this map going, that just looks really horrible to me. But we segmented the roads as best we could. So some segments are longer than others. We kind of more or less went from intersection to try to do that. Again, Josh mentions the data sources and results. So again, we talked about the different formulas, and then we then have numbers to look at. And so table 3 shows, well, the crashes with the segments of roadways with the most total crashes, and then we have those listed there. And what we're going to do with those, and you'll see down below, is really dive into that and get all the data from all those crashes and look and see and say, what can we do here? And look at the County Highway K and Shower Drive. If you're familiar with that one, that's on just south of Highway 60 by the Quick Trip. And so obviously we'll be looking at, how was that roadway before the Quick Trip came in? Is it the Quick Trip that's causing those crashes? What's what's causing those crashes there. Is it? And again, we'll look at all the other roadways that are there as well. We won't go into great detail today. We'd like to take the time to actually spend some time having us look at those and provide our analysis of those and with the crash reports and hopefully solutions that are there to help you out. Then we got the crash rate, and again, that we got map 3 and map 4 that shows where those locations are in the county with the highest crash rates. You see that a lot of them don't quite double up, but again, we'll be looking at for the highest crash rates. We have, as I mentioned, XX before between Kohler and J Road, and so we'll have a roadway profile in there. It'll show the number of crashes, all that kind of stuff, very similar to what we did for the intersection safety analysis, and then crash severity, and we've got the top 5 that are rated for crash severity, and then where they're at in the appendix down below. And then again, map 5 is those locations to give you kind of a feel for where those are in the county. We're going to work with our sewer pack and DOT engineers for existing and projected traffic volumes to see if there's a analysis on that, to see if there's a issue there, and then went right into the profiles of the roadway. Funding source, again, that table is not complete because we haven't done our complete analysis on it yet. And then we'll have a summary that's got a little more detail in it once we are able to adjust that. But table 7, if you see that, that's on page 33 of your packet. It's kind of a nice table that Josh put together of the rankings in each of the categories. You can see that some of them did double up a little bit. That even if they were high in crash rate and high in severity, those are ones that make sure we're taking especially attention to, but also shows you what category they are in the other categories to say that, yeah, it's in very high for a crash rate, but it's in, I'll pick on County XX and J Road again. The crash rate is pretty high. The total crashes, though, is obviously very low, right? They're 100 plus in that category, so ranking wise. And so you can say, yeah, there's probably not a lot of crashes, but they're pretty severe. The ones that did have in that area. So again, 4th in crash rate and 9th in severity. So again, we'll take a look at that. And then map 6 kind of combines all those data together so you can kind of see where they are throughout the county. And then I'll just turn your attention to the appendix C1, page 35 of your packet, basically County Highway K from Shower Drive to 60, as I mentioned earlier, and this is what you can kind of expect. You'll see that the total crash is ranked number 1. It's in the city of Hartford. The problem, high number of crashes. You'll see some images. The picture on the left-hand side shows where those crashes are by green or yellow dots. You'll see again that they're outside of the intersection of 60 and outside the intersection of Shower Drive. You'll have a lot more data in there, like total crashes, when do they happen, were they, wet conditions, night conditions, all that information. Was it impaired drivers? So we'll look through those categories, and down below when you see potential problems, we'll add more to those, provide a narrative of those, and you'll see the potential solution is blank as well. And again, not to spend time, but we will be going through these in more detail once we have a little more information, but you'll see profiles that are set up for each of the intersections that we talked about above. So once we get into those, if there's questions on those, we certainly can try to answer those today, but the intention was to give you kind of a nice overview today so that next time we meet, we'll be basically spending our time looking at all these profiles and not really too much time spending on the front end and why we're doing what we're doing. Hopefully that wasn't too quick of an explanation. Certainly you do have the information to read over between now and then. It'll probably be another 2 months or so by the time we bring this back. We don't want to do this one in intersection at the same committee meeting, because that might be just a little bit too much, but we'll separate those all over 2 meetings, provide you time to look at those, and provide hopefully some solution to these areas that we can work on and make our roads safer in Washington County.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Seeing none? See, we've plenty thorough.
A lot of information in here.
Yep.
There's a lot to.
Yeah, there's a lot to absorb. I'm really, really happy and proud of Josh to put this together, and really glad that the county executives allow us to keep this as a priority for Washington County going forward, and really looking forward to working with the local municipalities on this as well. Because, however, we do provide them a total crash map, it's another thing to provide a little bit of analysis for them where they don't have a lot of the staff time and expertise to actually do that out in the local areas. And it could be something as simple as, we did a curve analysis several years ago, and we put up chevrons on curves, and we put some edge line rumble strips on curves, and you see that. I think the result is amazing that a lot of those, where those crashes are, I'll take XX out of the equation, were not on curves. Because we did an analysis several years back and made sure that the proper signage was up or other amenities, because we saw we had issues with some of our curves in our county. XX is an outlier. We actually did redo a curve there several years back, reconstructed one, but we're still having problems with a segment just west of where we did that curve work. So we got work to do. We're not saying we're done, not a big pat on the back, but we're willing to look at our roadways and not just turn a blind eye to it.
I got a comment if you don't. I'm talkative today.
Go ahead.
So I sat through the traffic safety meeting, and this was presented to them as well. If my memory serves me, the DOT said Washington County is the only one that does this.
Correct.
This type of, so it's
Both of these, the intersection and the roadway safety, yes.
intersection. Was it intersection or was it both?
Both.
Both. Okay, yeah. So I just wanted to share that the DOT expressed that they're impressed with it.
Minnesota DOT does a great job at this, and we do steal some of their ideas. In full disclosure, Wisconsin DOT does not.
But it was interesting to learn that
Yes.
there's nowhere else in the state that does this analysis.
Once we have these complete, you'll probably see it at one of our highway conferences, a presentation by Josh and myself. Get the word out there.
No other questions? We'll move on to the 2050 Transportation Network Sustainability Plan for the City of Hartford and Town of Farmington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we've been working on these for quite some time for these two municipalities. I was hoping to meet with both of those municipalities this week. Unfortunately, we had wasn't able to meet with the City of Hartford this week. I am hoping to get another meeting scheduled with them shortly. I was able to meet with Town of Farmington just before this, and looking at our plan is we're going to make some modifications to our program behind the scenes. You might recall the ones we did was for Washington County, City of West Bend, and Village of Kewaskum. Town of Farmington is our guinea pig for our towns. And so there's some things that might have to change a little bit with our computer program, and I'll work with our IT department and GIS department to try to make that happen. So it might be a month or two before you see these come back and finalized as well with the situation with the City of Hartford. Once that balances itself out as well, we'll be able to get back on track with them. And I'm confident we will, with both municipalities, finish those in the next several months to get those done. And then once those are done, I purposely did not include drafts in this version because I do feel it's important for the local officials to sign off on it first before they're out there and available to the public, because they might not know that it's a draft version and think of it as, oh, they're doing my road in 2032 and really that we haven't really gotten that level of detail yet. So that's why I didn't include it, but it'll look very similar to the two previous municipalities' plans. We're looking forward to getting those completed and out to those, and then once those local officials have reviewed the plan, and then we'll probably bring them back at that point. That I think it's only fair that they see the plan before the Public Works Committee does. So we'll be working with them first, and you'll see it back here as kind of a draft version, basically answer any questions and to show you that they are complete and how we're doing on those. And we'll be soliciting the next group as well.
Sounds good. Any questions? And none? We'll move on to the resolution, county aided bridge and culvert replacement for the town of Farmington. I'll need a motion in a second. Motion from Supervisor Hartwig, second from Supervisor Schwab. Pretty straightforward. I don't know, is there?
If you have any questions, the project came in just a little bit over the original estimate by about $3,600. They're looking at splitting that in cost about $1,800 from the fund. If you recall, the fund started over at the beginning of the year. We did do a Town of Jackson project earlier for about $8,000, if I remember correctly. I don't recall the exact number on that. So obviously there's funds to do this.
Any other questions?
I'll abstain.
We got one abstain. Okay, see no other questions. All approved, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All approved and one abstain. Moving on to the next item, discussion regarding ordinance IT transition from executive committee to public works committee. So yes, our workload's getting busier.
If I may, this went to executive committee last night and did get approved unanimous. This was going to them for their approval. It's also coming to you. This is not a resolution. This is just a discussion item for this group because that decision was to be made by the executive committee. So this is here for information purposes. But as Chairman Shutterman pointed out, that IT at the end of February is transferred underneath me as a cabinet member. And so to lighten my workload up a little bit and not have to attend every executive committee and every public works committee, your workload increased. And so we'll be bringing those information. So you'll see the IT's quarterly reports, any funding needs that come through the system as well. So you'll see IT stuff to Public Works Committee, again, not knowing what that's going to look like following the elections, but if you're all back, you all get to work with IT stuff as well. So it makes a logical sense. IT works a lot with our facilities. We're doing office moves and stuff like that. So I'm glad to have them on board. Got a great working relationship with the IT director. So we're looking for more good things with coming from that direction. And as you know, shared services that we do in the highway department now, we're doing a lot more with the local municipalities. So I've got a good relationship with the local municipalities. So I think that'll just help strengthen that potential for shared services with IT as well.
So your budget goes up accordingly then too, right?
No.
Cover IT? No?
No, IT has its own budget.
They have their own budget? Okay.
IT has their own budget, and it stays with them. We don't get to
Gotcha.
don't get to intermingle budgets.
Okay. Any questions?
And we don't need to vote on this?
No, it was just a discussion item.
Yep. The rest of our items are that leads to the lead lateral update, which is our last item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did do a lead lateral presentation for the executive committee last evening. I know several of you happened to see that as well. So hopefully what you see here tonight is the improved version of that now that I've got a dry run under my belt. And so I'd be happy to explain the lead lateral program to this committee as well. In front of your table are handouts for the lead lateral. You see one of them is in your packet, but the rest are not. There are extra packets behind me if anybody would like. I was just looking to see if there's anybody else in the audience, and there isn't. But there's extra packets available here as well, should you like those. So with the lead lateral program, first as I started off last night, I did reflect on the grant program because it's not running as well as I would have liked. And I take that personally. And like I said, I got a good relationship with a lot of municipalities. This being the first grant that I've done, I look back and reflected on how it went and how it's going to date. Definitely things I would have done differently, and by no means did it go smooth on my end or with the city of West Bend. So I want to make sure I'm clear on that. A lot of emails going back and forth. I do take responsibility for some of that. Looking back, I would have certainly taken better notes, better minutes during the meetings. Would have been much more boisterous in my concerns of the program and the potential direction, and would have really stressed the defining goals of the program. And again, I looking back, as hindsight's a bear sometimes in 2020, but definitely would have done some things a little bit differently, and we should go back, but we can't, and we got to kind of hopefully move forward from that point. And really looking back, as I mentioned, the goals of the program was to complete, removal of lead laterals, the complete lead lateral, not just part of lead laterals, and repair of roadways. I think sometimes that gets a little bit lost, and want to go through some examples a little bit later on and how we can hopefully make that happen in the city of West Bend. And so how does the program fit these goals? So in the packet and in the first page of theirs are the two various grants. The first part of the grant is to get rid of the private side laterals on roadways where the the city of West Bend already completed the public side, and those mainly are 7th and 8th Avenues, and we certainly have in there another component about $5,000, but technically actual cost to do that. If you can imagine, the average is about $5,000. Some might be a little bit more, some might be a little bit less. As you can imagine, when you're repairing something in somebody's yard, you might have a tree you have to remove. You might be able to pull the lateral through the location of the old lateral. You might have to open trench it. They might have a sidewalk or something there, or other amenity that has to get repaired. Also, each individual house, when you take the new lateral into the house, they might have a finished basement. They might have carpeting, right? So there might be things you have to do each individually, just a little bit different. The cost is just a little bit different for each of those houses. But again, that it's not just 7th and 8th Avenue, but if there's other recent ones, we put the word 10 years plus or minus if there's other roads that were done recently that we can finish the job, so to speak, that the lead lateral is completed on the public side and only remaining on the private side that would be done. And if you look at I think it's the back of that same handout, I'd have to look and see if that's not in the packet, but there's a good display by the DNR, did a nice display, if you will, a handout, and I'm trying to bring it up on my screen right now. But what they said is that, it's not going to come up that quick, is that I'll just read it for you. That'll be just good. It's in the back of your pack. It's in the back sheet. It's the drawing that we're looking at. New research in lead in drinking water has raised concerns with DNR regarding the potential for increased lead levels when partial lead service lateral replacement occurs. The department is advising that municipalities replace lead service lines in their entirety. Partial replacing lead service lines can increase lead levels in homes. Visit the DNR Drinking Water and Groundwater Bureau's Drinking Water and Lead webpage for more information on lead in drinking water. I know that's going to be a big bone of contention, and we'll talk about later in the mayor's email about just doing some private side, but the direction from the DNR now is looking at when you're touching lead lateral, do it all. Don't just do half of it, do the whole thing. And so that's really what Grant wanted us to do, is to finish that first. It's not just doing all private sides throughout the whole city, but doing the ones where the public side was done. Let's complete the private side and get that done. So that's Grant 1. Grant 2, again, takes care of the whole lead lateral from Main to the house. Hopefully when a road reconstruction is being done, or at least the road will be repaved when it's done. We're looking at, again, at that same $5,000 actual cost for the private side, but then $15,000 on the public side. And what does that mean? That means from the water main to the curb stop, and the curb stop is usually a shutoff valve that's right behind the sidewalk, typically speaking, and that's what's considered the public side of the main. So we're looking at doing that. And the exercise I'm going to run through with you next is kind of a display of what that would look like financially and how that would be potentially done. And with that, if I could bring my screen up, Gina, up to there to share. This is going to be the handout with the yellow on it, highlighted going forward. And again, this is one of those hindsight things where I wish I would have done this activity with West Bend staff to kind of map out what is in my head and how this vision kind of works out a little bit. And I don't know if I can zoom in there a little bit more, but it's that's about as good as it's going to get for right. There we go. That's a little bit better. And so what I did was I took a project in the city of West Bend that was completed last year on Pennsylvania Avenue. And full disclosure, to my knowledge, I believe this did not have any lead laterals in it, but use it as an example as if it did have lead laterals in it. And again, I want to make sure I'm clear. This is the bid amount that I took off the city of West Bend's website. The as-built or as constructed conditions could certainly be different. If you might know that when they do projects, you bid it at a unit prices. And so some of your prices might go up. They maybe did some undercutting. Maybe the road was in poor condition, maybe not. So again, just a generality speaking of what the project looked like with, sidewalk was partially removed, so some was remaining. Curb and gutter was, for the most part, all removed and replaced, and new asphalt on the roadway as well as gravel. So you'll see the item on the far left-hand column, sanitary sewer, water, and general categories. So I lumped some stuff together that I believe was in the sanitary sewer category, in the water category, in the storm sewer category. So I took the bid and kind of combined it into these shorter versions. Certainly the bid tab is much more expansive than what you see. So I'll pick on the sanitary sewer line first. That was about $142,000 in the first category, first column for bid amounts. Water, $171,000. Storm sewer, $243,000, and on down the road. The middle column, which does not have a header, the $142,322.15 for sewer, shows the sewer and water and storm sewer works, all three utility works up above, and then separate out the what I'll call the roadway work down below for $370, $116, which is combining all those numbers to the left that you see there. Typically speaking, and again, this is typically, so I don't want to get in trouble for this, but working with the City of West Bend on their 2050 plan with their utilities, a general rule of thumb is that the roadway work that's over the water work, the roadway work above the sewer work, is paid for by those utilities. So I took it and took that money and said, well, Pennsylvania is about 30 feet wide, give or take, so I'll split it up equally three ways. Again, this is what I did to the system and what I believe the city does. I did ask the city engineer recently at a luncheon that I was at, and if they did divide that out on Pennsylvania, and they said they did, but I did not ask him the specific percentages. And so taking that you've got the sanitary sewer at 142, these divide to $370,000 for the road work, and the sewer would have paid $123,000. The water utility would have paid $123,000. You have the storm sewer as a separate item, and then the roadway work now comes down to $123,000. So that means the sewer utility adding the 142, the 123 ends up being $265. The water utility 171, 123 pays $295, and the green box is adding the storm sewer with the rest of the road work at $376, $239. And that, then again, if you're familiar, I know some of you are familiar with utilities. So utilities is a separate entity, has its own fund set aside. Much like the highway department has an enterprise fund, they run pretty much independent as well. So they get their funding from a lot of their rates, basically, what they do. And certainly the city has much more knowledge on utilities than I do. But that $367 you see in the green box, that was paid by either a levy, if they did assessment. I'm not saying they did, if they used LRIP type program, or others. So again, I didn't dive into how the city actually funded the 376. But basically what it amounted to is that the total project cost about $928,000 for 900 feet of roadway. And that's very important to keep in mind. So if you call it almost $1,000 a foot if you kind of do the math, right? So you got about $900,000 for 900 feet of roadway. If, and this is where the big if comes in, if all those laterals were lead, and the county did the $15,000 per lead lateral. We've got some numbers down below. The total project cost was $928,000, with basically 6% paid by the utilities, which left the remainder by that. The cost of the city amount again was $367. Under option 2 or grant number 2 at $15,000 per lateral gets you there. There's a possible 28 laterals on Pennsylvania Avenue. Again, I just counted up the number of homes on Pennsylvania. It's quite possible their lateral was off to a side road versus the main road. So again, speaking in generalities without too much knowledge, the city would have gotten a check for $420,000, again, if they were all lead laterals. So you look at that going, okay, the $420,000, the next line, for the roadway with the city expenses outside of the utility cost, $367, they would have gained $52,000 on the project, could have been for, and use those for engineering costs, inspection costs, stuff like that. So basically that grant would pay for the roadway work, again, not the utility work for sewer and water because they are separate entities. And they certainly, if need be, can borrow. I would imagine they have borrowing capacity. They might even have funds in their general fund in those accounts to help pay for some of this work. And this is where we're looking at as far as, the willingness to select roads that were perhaps not in their 5-year plan. And looking at these dollar amounts going, yes, if the sewer and water utilities if you look in the area, especially south and east of the Main Street and downtown West Bend, utilities will need to be replaced regardless because of their age and issues. A lot of the roads in that area are in poor shape. I did a quick analysis on, South 3rd Avenue between Maple and Oak had 19 laterals. It's only 470 feet, so roughly half of it. So if you take the 376, you divide that in half, you get maybe around 170. With those 19 laterals, because those homes are close together, they would receive a check for $285. More than covering the cost of that. South 9th Avenue between Poplar and Chestnut, $425, again, half the cost. They would receive a check for $195. Again, so you look at 367 versus 367 divided that by 2, right? You get about 180, and you're getting about 195. So again, you're covering the cost of the roadway. Every roadway is different, right? They might have more storm sewer, bigger storm sewer, smaller storm sewer, right? So again, this is just a quick snapshot, and also looked at South 6th Avenue between Chestnut and Maple, and again, for 470 feet, they'd get a check for $195, again, about half of that 900 feet. So again, it worked out on a couple of these different roadways. I did, kind of the back of the napkin work on that, and, we're looking at a $3 million project and versus which roads are in the plan, and believe me, when I looked at a 2050 plan, there's plenty of roads in the city of West Bend that could use work, that potentially add roads, maybe not even change roads, but add roads into the programs by adding some utility work and getting the roadway costs paid by the county would make a lot of sense. And so that's really what we're looking at, is that willingness to potentially add projects or even change them. I can tell you, if I came to this committee, as I mentioned last night, and said, we approved the CIP in November, here's $3 million. If we do this other road, would you be willing to make a change? My guess is you mostly would say yes, we'd be willing to make a change in our CIP if we're willing to get financial aid somewhere else, even to add roads or move a road up or move a road back. So looking at that, we did provide this grant to the mayor. County Executive Shulman sent that grant, both grants, out to the mayor. We were hoping for an answer by resolution by the end of March, and that hasn't happened yet. I sent out an email to the mayor, kindly requesting a response by the end of the month for at least grant 1. You'll see that that's one of the other handouts that you have that looks like an email handout. That certainly would be willing to, grant an extension if that's what they need. Hopefully a short extension, because this is ARPA funds and the time is running short. Before we start going to a second municipality, start really talking to them about, is this something they might be interested in and adding to their program. And so we're hoping, and it's very encouraging to see a member from the city here this evening in the audience, and hopefully that between last night and tonight, they're able to watch a couple of these videos and to look at the program and take that up as a council if that's something that they'd be interested in doing. In full disclosure, last night, the executive committee did look at the village of Kewaskum. If you're not familiar with that area, they're redoing Highway 45 right through this downtown heart of the village. The village originally told us they didn't have any laterals. Now they found about 10 or so. 6 of those lie on not Main Street technically, but on 45. And so the executive committee decided last night that we should probably extend grant 1 at least to them, to the village, potentially grant 2 for the work on Highway 45 to make sure that the entirety of the lead is removed on those projects. And constituents are watching out there, because we did get contacted by one of those individuals going, what about me? I've got lead, and what are you going to help me with? So they're out there, they're watching it and paying attention to what's going on. So with closing, I really think it's time to shift and look at this as an opportunity for the city. We certainly could dwell back and look at the last 5 months, and I'm sure there's things I know there's things I'd do differently and potential, but versus finger pointing and trying to get figured out what happened the last 5 months, I think it's time to move forward and really look at and how can we get this to happen. And for our constituents and the people that are sitting with lead laterals, you don't get opportunities like this all the time. And I know the city of Hartford got a grant from the DNR, but that grant's done now. So if not now, when?
Well, it was also brought up in executive committee to possibly sit down with the elected officials of West Bend.
Thank you. That's a great point. And
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To add on to that, Mayor Ongart was watching also last night, and this morning he already talked to Executive Shulman, and we've sent an email to thank him for coming forward, and I'm confident we can work together on this. So things are moving.
Advisor Newman?
Sure. I'd like to speak to this a little bit. There's a lot of moving parts to this, and the breakdown that Scott provided everybody, it's not every street that this applies to. It all depends. The numbers come out based on the number of lead laterals on each street, so that can skew the numbers one way or the other. The numbers can look better, the numbers can look worse, as far as what I'll call the local share, the city's portion of the road construction. We all know that there's a lot of planning that goes into these CIP projects. There's a lot of moving parts. There's utility funds that are planned out for years and years. When this program came up, those weren't part of the plans. So as Scott mentioned, if money becomes available in a grant program like this, there's going to be discussion on both parties. There's got to be some planning. I don't want the message from the county, which might have been portrayed at the meeting last night and maybe in the past, that the city's not willing to accept this, or they're not playing ball, they're not working with us on this. I don't think that's the message at all. The message that I'm here to say is the city is willing to look at this, but there are moving parts behind it. There's utility funds. It's not as easy as going to just borrowing money. There's planning and other expenses that have been planned out for 5-10 years that they have expense for as well. And to just change CIP projects or construction projects takes time. Scott knows that as well. Design, basically it's a year to design a road. When you've got water, sewer, and storm sewer, curb, gutter, there's a lot of engineering that goes into that, a lot of time. So I'm confident, as the chair has said, the city's willing to work. It's just there's a lot to this. It's in a very short amount of time to get it kind of worked out. I guess I'm confident again in saying the city is planning to, work with the county on this, but I don't want the message going out from the county that the city is not willing to play ball, I guess, because that's not the appropriate message.
if I could, I just want to elaborate on that. And Supervisor Newman brought up a good point that I should have mentioned. This is a great comment about, yes, does it work on every road? Absolutely not. Because if we look at, I'll call it right behind Badger Middle School, right? There's a lead laterals on the west side of the road, but Badger Middle School is on the east side. So you basically have half the road has lead laterals, or one side of the road, I should say. One side of the road has lead laterals, the other side does not. And there's other areas too around elementary school, the old courthouse, right? So there's other areas too where it doesn't work. But the good or the bad thing is there's unfortunately a lot of areas that this does work for. When you look at the map, if you recall what the map looked like, there are a significant amount of roads where this does work for, where the road is in bad shape and there's lead laterals that I think going through this as a starting program, right, that hopefully if this works out really well, there's maybe potentially more funding coming down the road that can help, and as the program moves, maybe it can switch and adjust to accomplish something of those stretches. So yes, I appreciate Supervisor Newman bringing that up, and I should have mentioned that earlier. Yes, it doesn't work in every case scenario because there are roads with less laterals, but there's plenty of them out there that are in poor shape with utilities that are 100 years old or give or take and have a lot of laterals. And so there's opportunities are out there, at least for this first roughly $3 million. I think there's no shortage of those type of situations out there. But yes, as we roll down the pathway, there's certainly going to be other ones where and then if there's overage on this, that could be used and saved up for other roadways where they just need a mill and fill. I also want to point out that if we look at this math and if there's a roadway where the utilities don't need to be done, it looks even better. That if you take out the sanitary work, water utility work, and if you don't need to do storm sewer work, now that 420 still covers the 376, but you don't need the 243,000 for storm sewer, but your still road costs are 370. So it's very similar that instead of leaving patches out, you still have the opportunity to, even if you don't do the underlying utilities, storm, sewer, and water, you'd still have the opportunity to redo the roadway, the curb and gutter through that. So, but if you have areas where you don't need utilities and the curb and gutter is still good, now you're looking really good. You just have to replace the asphalt. So there's other opportunities within there too that are potential out there. But unfortunately, a lot of those older parts, the curb and gutter probably needs to be replaced as well. And there's probably an issue with the storm sewer and the utilities at the same time because of their age. So there are opportunities out there. There might be other roadways that you still get to 15,000 per lateral based on what's selected, where the pendulum could swing greatly the other way. That maybe there isn't much storm sewer on that roadway. So when I use this as an example and that's why I didn't put like percentages in there because you're paying 117% of the roadway in this case scenario. Well, that's not going to be the case for everyone. Again, this was also bid numbers, as I pointed out, not what the city actually spent. So they could be a little bit higher, a little bit lower going through there. And I'm sure the city has the data of what that actual expenses were, so they might look differently if this gets presented to the council. For instance, their engineer, I'm sure, has a fantastic spreadsheet where you keep track of this stuff, and probably looks a lot better than what I'm providing.
Is it okay if I make a quick comment? Go ahead. I thank you, Doug, for bringing that up. Because that's the kind of conversations we got to have. So, that just. Now I understand the issues that they have and what we're dealing with and what they're dealing with and trying to get this all to work together. So with that, Supervisor Schwab.
Sure, thank you. And I appreciate the perspective as well. But the bottom line is, this is a generous offer from the county that I think, and I understand there's a lot of work that needs to be done to accept it. By the same token, there is a limit on the ARPA funds and when those have to go and when they have to be allocated and spent. So my question is, I didn't see anywhere in here where we had a deadline on how long we're willing to hold this before we allocate to a different purpose, and I may have missed that.
Well, we had wished originally for a response by the end of March 31st.
Yes, the response, but then even so, the money has to be.
Oh, I'm sorry.
distributed by
Correct.
the end of
I apologize.
26
Yes,
for ARPA.
end of 2026. Yes.
So, I believe it's a generous offer. I wish I would have bought Microsoft stock when that first came out, but I didn't do it. The bottom line is opportunities sometimes go away, and as much as I understand the city's predicament with trying to get everything done, we need to make sure that we don't waste funds either holding out for someone to claim them.
So I have a question. So I know that there's construction in this village of Kewaskum. It's going on right now.
Correct.
Okay, so how difficult, and I think you said yesterday there might be 2 lead laterals.
Six.
Six. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed
Six on 45, 2 on Main Street that they did several. So you had the number right. Just I probably confused it because I mentioned Main Street before, but Main Street's Highway 28 going east, so that has 2 remaining on it.
And that's the construction that they're working on right now?
Highway 45, so there's 6 of them
Okay.
that are potential right now that the village knows of. So they're doing their due diligence, and I'll give them credit for that. And like I said, they've reached out as well as the one of the landowners. So
So how difficult would that be? Because they've already got their plans already done, they've already started. So how difficult would that be for them to incorporate this into their current plan? I imagine there's a lot of people you have to coordinate with.
we would be, first of all, we'd obviously contact the village to have them accept the grant. Would be step number 1. And if they do accept that grant, whether it's grant 1 or a combination of grant 1 and 2, then we work with them as far as seeing if their contractor would be willing to do that work while they're on site, or if they'd have to do a separate bid for that work that's outside of the right of way, because the contractor is most likely staying within the right of way, staying from the back of the sidewalk in, again, most likely. And so now we're talking about working from the back of the sidewalk back. That road's going to be under construction for quite some time, unfortunately. So there's time for that road will still be closed while they can actually get in there and do that work and not disturb. And even if it's not till October or November they do the work, but if we have to work through some processes in the meantime, that I don't think it's insurmountable to be done as part of this project. Even if they have to do a separate bid item or something like that, we're talking 6 homes. The city of Hartford just went through the process, so we have good data within our county, contractors we can contact, and a firm that did the work for them, so that the setup time hopefully would not be too great for them to get that moving. I have not made personal contact with them yet. That was not what the discussion curtailed upon last night. I think the county executive was going to make the first contact.
Okay. And so what does that process look like, adding those 6 homes in Kewaskum? So, I mean, we're waiting for a decision from City of West Bend.
Right.
But can
There
we
was
shift?
discussion was had about additional ARPA dollars being potentially used for those projects was one of the decisions. But right now, we don't have an answer from the City of West Bend where, if we're talking $5,000 per lateral and there's 6 of them, that's $30,000. So maybe the grant, instead of being $3 million, is now $2,970,000. So I think that's what the executive needs to work out and flush out with the ARPA dollars being, his to dispense.
That was kind of going to be my question, Ed. I mean, this $3 million, right?
Yes.
This is not the end. There could possibly be more coming down the road as well.
I think the county executive made it clear that if this goes well and if there's funding available, we would like to continue this. That's where I mentioned that yes, it's important the first step's always the hardest, and it's been a hard first step, but I'm hoping that we have many more steps, and at some time we're running with this, and years from now we look back going, wow, what were we talking about? This is easy. Let's just get it done.
So I think it would be fair to say that if the county is going to get into this program of lead lateral replacement, we should not end the program just because the ARPA fund is gone. And I think that's what our executive was referring to, that, okay, our ARPA money's gone, no more lead lateral. That would not be a justice to our
I agree with that.
our county, our residents, or the people that have lead laterals. So I believe is that an appropriate message? I mean, that he would, if this works and it goes good, then we're going to have to fund it, whether it's levy, this first hit here is coming from the ARPA funds. If that's a fair statement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, just because of the timing on this sucks. Because, like you said, now we're moving forward with it and trying to catch up. If we can keep it moving down the years, then we can start tying things together and make it work with, West Bend's road program.
Yeah, that's part of the importance of meeting soon, because we like Supervisor Newman said, I understand the design time and what that means. It's real. The fortunate thing is that with our reconstruction projects, we also have to deal with a lot of purchasing of right-of-way, and typically speaking, when a city does reconstruct, they don't have to do a lot of right-of-way acquisition, so that does make things a little bit easier. But when Supervisor Newman mentions utilities, there's not just the city's utilities of sewer, water, and storm sewer, but you might have to get We Energies to move a gas main. You might have to get We Energies to move an electric main. You might have to get AT&T out there, or some other TDS. I believe they came through the city. So it's that type of coordination and getting your plans done at a time so they can move their stuff before the other stuff can maybe even get into the ground. So that timeline is a real timeline that Supervisor Newman mentioned, and that's the importance of keeping this thing moving.
Sounds good. Any other questions? Comments? Seeing none, this is it for the meeting, and I do want to say I appreciate having all you guys on this committee for the last 2 years, and we'll see what happens after the election, right? And who's part of this committee now. With that being said, the next meeting date is to be determined, and this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you all as well. It's been great.
Thank you.